what I want to do is more than anything to share a teaching experience with an example of some activity I made in a course I gave on aesthetics and nature. But well, my point of departure, I thought, well, this is not an academic meeting in the strict sense, but a meeting to in a more informal way to share our thoughts and our ideas on aesthetic teaching. So my point of departure will be just that, a point of departure, not an argument that I will defend or expose, but just a point of departure, which is that teaching, studying, and thinking aesthetics it has meaningful practical consequences. And well, this is, of course, you will realize that this has an inspiration, or it has a relation to classical pragmatism, and also has an inspiration on Marxist philosophy. Well, on the idea Marx put on one of his Feuerbach's thesis that philosophers have so far interpreted the world, but it's time to change it. So I believe that teaching aesthetics, teaching philosophy in the broad sense, but specifically teaching aesthetics has many possibilities to change many things. And well, starting from changing our sensibility, our way of interacting to the world and of understanding it. So being this my starting point, I would like to talk about a class project I made. Well, I would like just first to say that if aesthetics has practical consequences, at least at some point, this should be related to transformation of the world in some sense and at some point. I'm not asking, well, this is a very modest claim. I don't want you to think that I'm thinking of great changes, immediate changes, revolutionary changes, or not, at least not in the strict sense of the word. But so the question is, how is teaching aesthetics relevant for understanding and transformation? Well, I am thinking of aesthetic education in a very broad sense that encompasses both school and college education on one hand, and on the other hand, informal education, which is everywhere, I believe. And I think that as philosophers or aesthetics teachers, we have a great possibility to relate to this informal education. So in the first case, it seems to me that teaching has two main challenges, or two very important challenges. And first of them is to offer a rigorous education with proper explanations and careful discussions of concepts, problems, authors, texts, all the things, works that belong to the philosophical traditions we are expected to teach. And aside from this, which is not a small task, aside from this, to encourage students to search on their own, to pose their own questions, and well, to think on their own, as we all know. But the second challenge is to prevent education from being an obstacle for thought and experience. Well, this has to deal with the formal education, formal aesthetic education, and there is the second realm of aesthetic education, which is the informal one, and the one we get or we offer through a wide range of situations, which might be a conversation, a walk, everyday life activities, and well, podcasts and other kinds of publications. But I will not talk about this. I just want to mention it because I believe that we have great challenges to go beyond the classroom. Well, so the experience I want to talk about was a course project, a class project the course was on aesthetics and nature, and most of the students were philosophy students. Some of them were studying literature or art, but most of them were, well, it was a mixed group, not a very big one, but very interesting and very, well, very good students, all of them, very curious and active. So at the beginning of the course, I asked the students to choose a plant for a stem cutting in order to let the roots grow. They should place the plant in a transparent recipient with water so they could observe the roots as soon as they appeared. Well, the precise task was to observe the growth as attentively as possible and to draw the roots. That was really a real challenge. It was very difficult, but to draw the roots every several days when if they realized there was a change or they thought something it could be draw and well to observe and draw. The project was intended for a short period of time because we didn't want to stress the plant by letting the roots grow in a medium different from soil. This is a very, as you surely know, this is a very common way to propagate plants. So everyone knew how to do this kind of things. Well, of course, the students were encouraged to put the plant on soil in a pot or a garden in a pot or a garden, so it could properly grow as a plant and not only as a project, a school project. So the duration varied depending on each plant because they don't grow at the same time with the same velocity. No? So, well, I introduced a very precise instruction about the use of words. They could only write the date. They could describe nor explain nor make any sort of speculations. They couldn't use words. And well, drawing, because the idea was that drawing would be the way to follow the observation. And as simple as this exercise seems, the outcome was really amazing. Most of us have seen roots growing from the stem in a water recipient. It's a very, as I've just said, it's a very common way of propagating domestic plants. But we had not, or at least we hadn't observed them with the attention needed to draw the complicated lines traced by the roots. The difficulty increased very fast, and at some point, the roots were a world in itself. They were something really difficult to follow. It seems to me that we all had a feeling of awe that was also growing as the roots showed their complexity. We usually don't think of a plant focusing on the roots because they are invisible to us. One of the aims of this class project was to change the perspective and to realize that we perceive that what we perceive has its not perceived correlate, and that many times, of course, we perceive a lot of things and we simply don't notice them. But in this case, we can't see the roots normally, and when we were perceiving them with attention and with a with a careful observation to being able to draw them, then something changed. Well, but there was another important aim with this project, and it was to think from experience, or in other words, to have an experience that would lead us to further thinking. I came to this idea in the idea of this class project from a course I have taken on birds' behavior. And in this course, after a few lessons, we were asked, well, you are asked, if you take this course, you will be asked to describe what you see in a certain video of birds doing things. And what did I do? Well, I made inferences. I had information. I had taken a few lessons, and I had learned things. So I had information, and I made inferences and interpretations instead of descriptions. And this was very surprising for me to realize, to be conscious of this kind of thinking, of acting also. And I think as philosophy students, teachers, scholars, we tend to have a theory in hand that many times, and well, not always, of course, it's theoretical thinking is of course very important. It's the core of our doing. But in many times, this kind of having a theory in hand obstructs our experience, I think. Well, of course, I'm not talking about being a tabula rasa or having no concepts and no expectations. This is what we are and what happens. But I think it's very important to try to avoid theory as the orientation for our experiences. Well, at least every now and then. So my point is to be able to try a more phenomenological approach and to refresh every now and then our interaction with the world by letting it speak for itself. I am convinced that this has to be part of our teaching methods. Well, at least I'm trying to do this sort of things. Well, when the time came to show the drawings and comment on each one's process of observation and drawing, one of the students mentioned that before the roots appeared, she watched changes on the leaves and tried to guess why they were becoming yellow. So she was trying to find an explanation before the observation exercise even started, because the observation exercise was related to the roots and not to the leaves. And it was very interesting because the first drawings were of leaves. For many days, she was drawing the leaves and the color, the yellow coloration of the leaves. And she completely forgot that she was expected to observe the roots. Well, it was very, very funny because at the end we were conscious of many of our ways of relating to the world. Well, two other students told me that they were worried because they felt it took too long for the roots to appear. Well, we had no idea. We had never done this in a conscious way, but we were very, very distressed because of nothing was happening. Well, this too. But the interesting thing here was that these two students asked for help and for advice, and in this way they involved their aunt, the grandmother, the mother, mainly the women of their women relatives, because they knew they were able to grow beautiful plants in pots and gardens. So most of the students said that family and friends became involved or interested in their projects. And what we could clearly see was that something familiar, as domestic plants are, received a different kind of attention, a renewed kind of attention and care. And this is another important thing. They took care of something, of a living being. And this kind of renewed attention was shared by small groups of people at home and in the classroom. Well, I have to say, that I find a mistake in my design. I found a mistake, because after the course ended, I discovered that roots, well, I read about roots, more about roots, and I discovered that roots avoid light as much as leaves search for it. And this seems very obvious. If you say it, it seems very obvious. But it's not that obvious, because this is the way we propagate. It's a very common way of propagating plants. And scientists themselves, they grow roots on transparent media. because there is no other possibility of observing what's going on with them. But well, so I realized this, and I realized that the roots grow so rapidly in different directions, making this very complicated traces I mentioned before, because they are looking for darkness, they are avoiding light, they're searching for a spot where they can be in the dark. So I realized we should have protected the plants from receiving light all day long. And this is possible too. If you have your glass and you cover it while while you're not drawing or observing, and then the plant doesn't have to be so stressed, and you can continue with your project, of course. Well, so theory and information, knowledge should have come on time to design the observation project. So there's a time where information and theory are really, really decisive. So, well, I can change this for if I try, give it another try with another group. Well, before this forum, I asked, when I thought it would be interesting to share, well, at least I wanted to share this sort of experience and to have your comments, if you want to, your suggestions and objections maybe. And I wrote to those students and I asked them if they wanted to share drawings or I tried to reach them because they're graduated students now, though, so it was not very easy to get the drawings, and really I didn't get them. That's the final conclusion is that I didn't get anything that I could share with you. I mean, drawings, because I think they were very shy because they were not good. They didn't draw. Most of them were poets or they did other kind of things, musicians, but they didn't draw, and they were kind of afraid of being mistaken, of making awful drawings and things like that. But when the project ended, they realized that was absolutely unimportant. Well, still they didn't share the drawings, and if they did, they only shared the ones that didn't show the complicated roots. And I have to say that they made amazing drawings. It was really amazing to see what they have achieved as with a pencil. No? Well, but one of them had written something at that time, and he kept it. So, and he told me that he could share it with the forum if I wanted to. So I would like to read what he said, what he wrote. Well, here's Eugenio. He's a very brilliant young student. Well, he says, the activity motivated me to stop and observe my plant in depth. Little is thought philosophically about the relations we develop with non-human living beings. So it was a great opportunity to be able to communicate with this living being and to let it say things. Despite the lack of technical training to make fine strokes and portray proportional shapes, I think a quite interesting result was achieved. The drawings are the result of a series of impressions that the plant made on me. This communication did not happen immediately, but required attention and patience. Well, here it ends. Well, I have taught 3 courses on aesthetics and nature so far. And every time someone comes and tells me that the way she or he experiences and conceives nature has changed since they participated in one of these courses. Well, I have to say that this is just an activity, a complementary activity, the one I have just described, but we read Kant and Burke and Hegel and everyone. We read philosophy, we read poetry, we read, well, many things. So this is a formal course, not a mandatory one, but a formal course. So there is a connection. I believe that it has to be, or it can be, a connection between what we experience and what we consciously perceive and what we theoretically learn and discuss. Well, so they say that their experience and their conception of nature have changed. And maybe this should not be surprising, or this should not be surprising, because we all change as college students, whatever we study. It's a very important part of our process of growing and being independent beings, independent persons. And it's a very important period of the construction of our autonomy. Well, but as philosophy students, we walk the path of doubt. We learn to think in a critical manner, and we shake the very foundations of our beliefs and expectations. And in a broader sense, everyone who thinks critically reconsiders her or his thoughts, actions, experiences, as well as his or her plans for the future. So this happens in many other arenas. It's not a particular thing of philosophy, of studying philosophy, or particularly of aesthetics. But I think that this kind of exercises and of practices that join the experience and thought, well, reinforce the possibility of changing in a conscious way. What I have discovered with this exercise is that they realize that they could be observant and careful with a living being. They discovered themselves as people who could care, who could look after and grow a plant. And I think maybe they were already that kind of persons, but they were not very, very conscious of that. So, well, taken in an isolated way, well, small projects like this may not have an encompassing effect. But what is at stake here is the formation of sensibility through learning, experiencing, thinking in a community of interacting agents. I think this is a very important thing. And well, Shelby has just mentioned this possibility of embracing sociality and community. And I believe this is a very, very important thing that can be done from aesthetic learning and teaching. Because I think aesthetics is very intuitive. It's not, I would say that it's just experience and perception and sharing things. And no, this is a part, but rigorous thinking is also at stake here, but it's not separated from the other things. So aesthetic thinking goes beyond the classroom and the academic circles, and I think this is well, I have felt that this is some of the main, this is one of the main impulses of this kind of forums and the encyclopedia that Valerie asked us, well, invited us to write for. And I think that this is a great challenge. I would really want to pick your brains on this, because I believe that this is a huge challenge. If you see students changing while learning certain things that are oriented and that are planned, well, they might not change, they might not get involved, but I think that it is what is expected to see the results of this sort of teaching, of philosophy teaching and aesthetics teaching. But what happens beyond the classroom, not only with students, but with their communities, with the way in which they, and we ourselves, we as citizens, as family members, as teachers, where, in which way does it has a consequences, practical consequences that are beyond the classroom and beyond formal education? Well, this is, of course, a question that is always open, and I believe this is a constant challenge to realize, I mean, to attend. But I would really like to hear if you have any ideas. I thought of this presentation more than more, not that much, not in a lecture sense, but in more conversation, maybe if there's time and opportunity to have some discussions of this, and maybe to know some of your own practice. Well, just to finish my intervention, well, my this part of the intervention, I would like to add that I think these activities show both our common grounds, and something that is very important. I believe that it's very important to acknowledge it. They show our differences, and our differences in a proper realm. I mean, in a situation that it's not a conflicting one. They give us a possibility to share things and ideas, that experiences, ideas, actions, of course, judgments and actions as well, that show that we are different people. We find different things. We look for different things, but still we can interact, respecting diversity and encouraging peaceful and creative ways of dealing with our differences. So showing our common grounds and differences as well, they may derive, well, it's what I think it's an important thing, they derive in reflexive discussion in such a way that they embrace our solidarity, our sociality, and, well, our possibilities to transform maybe a small part of the world, but maybe chain reaction to find more encompassing and more long-standing effects of this sort of transformation.